In this tutorial, we'll be looking at a corporate trouser, and it will take the form of a straight cut trouser. Now we have the measurements displayed on the screen, and I've already marked out the margins, 2 inches at the side front, yeah, and 2 inches above it. And then we'll be labeling this margins. Now this part I'm labeling now is the side front, and the horizontal line above there will serve as the waistline. And then I'll go ahead and label it waistline. So then I'll be taking my vertical measurement. I'll first of all mark the hip line of 9 inches. I'll mark this at different points so I'll have a straight line. And then after marking them like so, I'll then use a ruler and draw a horizontal line, and that's the hip line. So the next thing, I'm placing the crotch. And to measure the crotch, I have displayed a picture there, the one that you have to sit and the one that you can stand, measuring from the navel to the back half length. And I did that, and I had 11.5 inches. I marked that at several points, and then I'm drawing a horizontal line to indicate the crotch line. And so I'll go ahead to label these lines, the hip line and the crotch line. On the hip line, I'll place a quarter of the hip circumference. A quarter of 45 inches is 11 1/4, and I'm adding half inch for seam allowance. I will place the same measurement on the waistline, 11 1/4 plus half inch, that's 11 3/4. And on the crotch line as well, I am placing the same measurement of 11 3/4 inches. So then I'll draw a vertical line from the crotch line to the waistline. I'll label that center front. So that's the center front, okay? That line comes in the center. So the next thing, I am calculating the crotch extension, which is dividing the hip circumference by 20. I divided that by 20 and I had 2.25 inches. So I marked that and I extended the crotch line to meet 2.25 inches. And then I will use the curve part of my pattern master, and I will connect from the 2.5 I marked. I'll connect it to meet the center front, the center front line. Then I'll measure what I have on the crotch line from the side front to the crotch extension. Now I have 14 inches, and I'm marking the midpoint of 14 inches, which is 7 inches. Now I'll mark the 7 inches on the hip line, and I'll mark it again on the waistline. After that, I'll draw a vertical line from the crotch line to the waistline, and that becomes the dart line. Okay, so for the dart, I am observing a dart length of 6 inches. And on the dart line, on both sides, I will observe half inch on the waist. That's for the dart. Then I will draw an inverted triangle from the point of the dart length to the waistline. And this is what it looks like. Okay. So after observing the dart, I will measure a quarter of the waist circumference of 35 inches. That's 8 3/4. And I'm measuring the dart I have there, which is 1 inch, and I'm replacing that. So on the waistline, for the waist measurement, I am placing a quarter of the waist circumference plus 1 inch for that. I'll connect that point to meet the hip line. Now note the way I'm using this pattern master. I'm extending it above the waistline. Okay, we'll do a little contouring later. So for the part I extended upward, I'm placing half inch on that line, and then I'll come to the center front and mark half inch below the waistline, and then I'll connect the half inch I have above the waistline to the half inch I have below the waistline on the center front. Please follow this tutorial closely. Okay, so I am placing, you see that 7 inches, I'll mark it as several points, and then I'll extend that line to meet the length of this trouser. Extending it to meet the length of this trouser, this becomes the grain line. Now the grain line in the sense that this will be the measure for our measurement on the knee and the length of this trouser. Okay, so now I'll measure from the waistline to my knee. My knee is 23 inches and I'll mark that. At that point, I'll draw a horizontal line. Now on this horizontal line, I'll place the knee round measurement. Now the knee round measurement is 20. Dividing that by 2 is 10 inches. So I'll divide that 10 by 2 and I have 5 inches. That 5 inches, I'll place it on both sides of the grain line. Okay, 5 inches on the left, 5 inches on the right, and then I'll connect the crotch line to the knee. Now towards the side front, I'm connecting from the crotch line to the knee, and on the center front I am connecting from the crotch to the knee as well. Now on the length I am placing the same measurement. That is why it is called a straight trouser. Now it is called a straight trouser for this reason, because from the knee downwards we have the same measurement. Now if it was going to be a flare trouser, the bottom will be bigger. If it's a pencil, the bottom, the length, the bottom, that ankle part will be narrow. Okay, but because this is a straight trouser, I am making it the same thing. Now I had to attach a little paper for me to have the desired length of the trouser, and I measured the length I need for this trouser is 40 inches. I'm adding 2 inches for seam allowance. I am drawing horizontal lines at the points that I have marked. Okay, and I'll cut out the excess. Then we have our trouser. So I'll simply place this on the fabric. Now the fabric has to be unfolded because we need 2 pieces for the front panels. So I'll cut exactly what I have on the pattern. Alright, we are not adding any seam allowance. It's up to the length. I notched the dart and I'm done with the front panel. So for the back panel, I'll need to label the hip line again, and I'll slash it on the hip line. Now for the back panel, we are doing a slash and spread method. So we'll have the crotch depth for the back panel. Now at the back we have the bottom, so of course it is more curvy. The back panel will be more curvy than the front panel, so we need a little allowance for the butt so it won't be so tight. So now we are using the slash and spread method, and we are slashing it at the hip line. So I will open it with 1.5 inches. Now if you have more than 45 inches, you can use up to 2 inches, but I like to use 1.5 for this measurement because I don't want it to be too slacked. All right, I don't want it to be bulky, I don't want it to be baggy. So then I'll ensure that it is 1.5 inches apart at the hip line, and I'll secure this with pins Okay, so when you're placing your back panel, you need to place it so you have room enough at the crotch line so you can mark your crotch extension for the back. Now I'll be using the seam allowance for the back panel. All the seam allowance goes to the back panel, and I'm using 1.5 inches. Remember, we added half inch when we were when we were placing the hip line and the crotch line. Okay, remember that we added that half inch, so I need just 1.5 inches extra for me to have a complete half inch on both sides for the trouser. And then I extended the crotch line with 3 inches. I'll connect that to meet the 1.5 inches I have marked on the center back. So I'll cuff it with the pattern master and extend it like this. So I'll simply connect the waistline, okay, to what to the 1.5 inches. Then from the crotch line below, I'm marking same 1.5 inches. Okay, I'll mark it all the way to the length, and then I'll connect it to the back crotch extension, and I'll extend it all the way to the length. So at the length there, I extend it a bit, like half inch, beyond the line. Okay, just so when we are hemming it, we won't run short of fabric, and there won't be any tension around the hemming. To be relaxed. So then I'll cut this out just the way I am doing, and there will be a sewing tutorial. So if you'd like to be part of this sewing tutorial, please subscribe, give me a like if this tutorial adds any value to you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video.